And so what the Imam is going to do in the next couple of pages is highlight some things which can impact positively a marriage. So now we're talking about defining roles, defining responsibilities, highlighting rights and obligations, and then talking about manners. And so he begins here with a section about good companionship. Good companionship here, of course, you're talking about your spouse between the husband and the wife. And so he begins talking about what is or what should be considered, what a man should consider when they are looking at a woman to possibly marry. And so many of you are familiar with some of these things, as the Prophet ﷺ highlighted various characteristics and qualities. The first, he said, is the faith, that you should look for religion, religiosity, and spirituality. And he said this is the foundation. This is the foundation. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Alayka bidhat ad-din," that you should find the one that has a strong religion. And if she doesn't have a good, solid foundation in faith, then the husband's religion will be lost as well, typically speaking. And because of that, he will be abased. And also, if the woman, she becomes madly jealous, he will continuously be in turmoil and live a very troubled life. There's a tendency, in the Islamic tradition, you find that the Prophet ﷺ, even his own wives, they had moments of jealousy. And he, ﷺ, had to kind of cope with that in a very graceful way. Number two is husnul khuluq, which is good manners. And he says that the woman with poor manners is a greater harm than a benefit. And as we know, the Prophet ﷺ, he was sent to perfect manners. Islam is all about good manners, developing good habits, manners with you and Allah, manners with you and His Messenger, the manners that you have with you and others around you, including your spouse and your children, and of course the manners that you have with yourself. Number three is husn al-khalq, which is attractiveness. This is something that should also be considered. And this is something that's just very natural and sought after. And by finding somebody that you're attracted to physically, it is that which will shelter you and secure you, so that you're not constantly looking around and the eye is wandering. And for this reason, in Islam, you're requested to look at your potential spouse, your fiancé, if you will. You're supposed to go and look and to see them. There was, as he says, a group of people that used to not do that. They would not go and look. And they got married not for the purpose of enjoyment and pleasure. And it was also mentioned here, the Imam Ahmad, the great Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala, actually married a woman who was one-eyed, as opposed to that woman's sister. Originally, he kind of sought her hand for marriage and then decided to choose her sister instead, and he found out later that she had only one eye. One of them was removed. So Imam Ahmad this was not his first wife. He married Abbasa, who was his first wife, and she was the mother of his son Salih. She's referred to as Salih, and she passed away. And then after she passed away, he married this woman. Her name was Rayhana, and she was actually his bintu ammihi, which was his cousin. And she when they got married, after they got married, a couple of days or so went by, and of course she knows, her sister who had both eyes, she asked Imam Ahmed, do you find anything in me that's displeasurable, if you will? And he said, yes. What do you think he said? Your one eye. No, he said, the sandals you're wearing were not found during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And she said, later that day she went and sold them in the market and bought some old beat up sandals that, traditional type. But of course, this is very rare. Imam Ahmed is not the standard by which most are measured, and certainly not expected to live like that. And this, of course, is also, it goes against the grain of nature, of human nature. So that is an outlier. Those types of cases are outliers where a person is not ultimately concerned about attraction. There may be other qualities that they're more concerned about. However, it is important to be attracted to your spouse. And so when you're looking into that, and this is a testament because this comes also from Imam Ahmed. He said that if a person wants to get married, then they should ask about physical attraction first. They should inquire about physical attraction first. How do they look? Are they beautiful? Are they handsome? Are they attractive? And then they should ask about faith. Ask about the deen next. And then if you like the faith of that person, then you marry them for the sake of their faith. And if you don't like their faith, then you leave. You walk away from the potential marriage. So essentially what that's doing, if you can follow the line of thinking, is that you're not in essence marrying them for their physical attractiveness. You say, oh, they have a good religion, and then you look at their attractiveness and you say, oh, and they're beautiful, I'll marry them. Or they're not attractive to me, so I'm not going to marry them. And so you end up sacrificing the good religion, the good faith. So the idea is that you deal with what is lesser first and then more important next. The next thing is number 4, which is a low dowry. One of the greats of the past, Sa'id ibn Musayyib, married his daughter. He married his daughter off for dirhamain. It's just like, it's a small amount of money. And this was the way of the righteous. The great companion Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, "La tughalu fi muhur an-nisa." Don't be excessive when it comes to the dowries of women. And just like it's disliked to be excessive in a dowry when it comes to the woman, it's also disliked that a man ask about a woman's wealth. That a man inquire as to, how much is she worth, how much does she make, etc. This is also considered makruh. It's disliked. And he says that one of the greats of the past, Sufyan al-Thawri, if a man marries a woman and says, what does she have? Money. Then know for certain that he's a thief. فَعَلَمْ أَنَّهُ لِسْ. He's a thief. That he's in it for the money. And there may be other things besides money that people are asking about. And so, this is, of course, one thing that should be considered. The next thing is virginity. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged. And this is why it's so important that, young people in particular, we have a number of young people here, they prize that. And they safeguard that. The greats of the past, and they would say that, this virginity is something that it increases the love between you and your spouse to be each other's first, if you will. And it's something that there's a natural inclination to be more loving and to treasure the first person that you're attached to in this very intimate way. And this is how a person can reach the pinnacle, if you will, of love, or one of the means in which you can. Not to say that it's impossible if you're not, but it certainly does help. And it's also something to say about the nature of man, as a male, not finding someone who's been with another man as desirable, if you will. Number 6 is that the woman be childbearing, and we talked about this before. That one of the main objectives of Islam is that you have children in order to increase the population of the world and of the ummah. Number 7 is an-nasab, which is your lineage. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you come from a particular family or caste or class, but what he mentions here is that you come from a pious house. You come from a religious house. That's the nasab. That's the lineage that you want, where there's a tradition in the family of righteousness, of piety, of goodness. And then number 8 is that you marry outside of the family. Right? We know that in Islam it's permissible to marry cousins, etc., extended relatives, but it's actually preferred that you marry further away from your own bloodline. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned explicitly. He says that just like the man should look at the woman and these characteristics, it's also appropriate that the wali, which is the guardian of the woman, look at the man for similar things, that they look into the man for their religion and for their character, for their condition. How are they? Because by marrying off your, whoever you've been charged as a guardian, you're essentially putting them into bondage with a man. And so you have to have the insight to choose wisely, or to help choose the right partner. So it goes both ways. There are things that you look for as a man, you look for in a woman, and there are things in a woman or as a wali that you look for in a man, either for yourself or for your daughter or for your sister, whoever it may be. He says that when you marry off the woman to a fasiq or mubtadi', which is an open sinner or an innovator, then you've basically you've wronged her in a great way. You've done a disservice and an injustice to her by doing that. It was asked to al-Hasan al-Basri, great imam of the past. He says, someone asked him, who should I marry my daughter to? And he said, marry your daughter to whoever fears Allah. Because if he loves her, if the man loves her, then he will akramaha, he will treat her well, and he will be nice to her. And if he's upset with her and angry, then he won't harm her, he won't oppress her, because his piety and his fear of Allah will prevent him from doing something that's oppressive. So those are a couple of things to keep in mind when approaching marriage, or even if you're already married. Some of these things can be developed. Some of these qualities and characteristics, some of us here have been married, and some of us have been married for quite some time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or whatever it may be, and it's never too late to work on your marriage. And one of the ways that you can do that is by trying to incorporate some of these practices. Beginning with your religion, moving on to your character, beginning and then physical attractiveness, etc., etc. So those are important things to keep in mind.